There has been a lot of noise made on this platform regarding the Acolyte and the overall state of Star Wars in the hands of Disney. Most people are completely destroying the show, and a very small few are defending it. And by this point, you've probably heard or seen hundreds of videos absolutely lambasting the show to smithereens. So instead of simply piling on, I decided I'd make a video attempting to fix the Acolyte. Before I start making my changes to the Acolyte, I do want to briefly talk about some of the narratives surrounding the show. This series didn't bomb because it has a female lead or a diverse cast. It failed because it's poorly written, meanders in boredom for long stretches, and the motivation of our characters constantly change on a dime with no rhyme or reason. The quote-unquote woke agenda had nothing to do with the Acolyte's failures. It sucks for purely plot and execution-based reasons. Now onto the fun stuff. Right off the bat, I'm making the show take place 1,000 years before The Phantom Menace. Being 100 years before makes no sense, and having a younger version of Ki-Adi-Mundi in the show doesn't just magically fix the canon issues that this created. So let's just set it a millennia prior, that way the canon remains intact, and the characters here are allowed to be the current High Council and can shine as the current Jedi leaders. Now, the idea of a pair of twins being at the center of the narrative here is interesting to me, especially having them on opposite sides of the Force, yet sharing a strong Force connection between one another. It's something I think could have been fascinating, so we're going all in on this idea. Osha will be a straight-up Jedi, and May is going to be a straight-up Darkseid user. They're not going to be a Vergence in the Force, or the same person split into two, just twins who happen to join opposite sides of the Force. I'm also going to cut the Coven of Witches from the show entirely, and I know not having the power of many will be heartbreaking to fans everywhere, but I'm just gonna have the show start off with two younglings in May and Osha going through some trials, trying to become Padawans. And the first two episodes will focus on these two younglings and their interactions with their primary instructors, Master Torben, Indara, and Sol. The big end note of episode 2 will be that the Jedi Masters have decided to reject May from the Order because they sense too much anger within her, and they are reluctant to allow a pair of twins into the Order fully, as keeping your emotions in check is an immensely important aspect of being a Jedi, so having a family member with you each step of the way would seem counterproductive. So in essence, they decide to pick one or the other. And episode 2 would close with May being kicked out of the Order as she passionately pleads for Osha to leave with her, but Osha decides to stay and become a Jedi without her sister. I think this would not only be an interesting setup for the show, but it'd also show us the journey of becoming a Jedi from the perspective of a youngling, which is something we haven't really seen before. Episode 3 would then jump forward in time, about 15 years or so, and would start with a sequence of a now adult May entering a cave where she is confronted by a vision of her twin sister. And after a heated conversation between the two, May would pull out her red lightsaber and stab through the vision of Osha. We'd then hear applause from her master from outside the cave, congratulating May on passing her final test. It would then be revealed that May and her master, who is wearing a mask, are on the planet Dagobah, and that May was in the same cave Luke Skywalker would eventually confront a vision of Darth Vader in one day. May's master, simply known as the Acolyte, would then tell May that she's ready to seek her retribution. And the show from here on out would really just be a revenge story. May is upset that she was not only abandoned by the Jedi, but by her own sister, and she's let the dark side completely consume her. And I think the beauty of this version would be that May has a very clear goal and is just a straight up villain, but one that is understandable, and while we don't have to root for May's retribution, we can comprehend what drove her to seek it. Episode 3 would culminate in a 1v1 between May and Master Torben, and May would ultimately kill him just before the credits roll, in a somewhat similar fashion to the actual Acolyte's opening sequence. Episode 4 would then see a team of Jedi, including Osha, Indara, and Sol, examining the scene of the fight, as they would have received word of Master Torben's death, and immediately upon arriving, Osha can sense that her sister was at the scene of the crime and is solely responsible. Upon returning to Coruscant, they would inform the Jedi High Council of the news and that May was the killer. Osha claims that she still has a strong Force connection to her sister, and believes she can sense where May is gone. So the council would send Indara, Sol, and Osha to investigate. Episode 5 would then center around the three Jedi, Osha, Sol, and Indara, traveling to and eventually arriving on a forest-filled planet. And during the space voyage to this remote world, Osha would receive conflicting advice from both Sol and Indara. Sol is giving encouraging advice about trusting the Force and staying true to who Osha knows herself to be, whereas Indara is more focused on making sure Osha is prepared to strike May down, if that's what needs to be done. Episode 5 would end with the three Jedi finally finding May in the forest, and Osha, shaken by what Indara said to her on the ship, would immediately attack May and begin the conflict aggressively. Sol would then look to enter the fray and would eventually have a clear strike open to take May out, but just as he goes to strike May, he gets force pulled away by Master Indara, who would then ignite her lightsaber, revealing a red blade. Master Indara is the Acolyte and May's secret master. Episode 6, which would be the last episode of my Acolyte reimagining, is going to be an action-filled episode that would occasionally cut back and forth between the Osha and May lightsaber fight and the Sol and Indara clash. As for who would win these battles, I would have Indara kill Master Sol after a long, hard-fought fight, and then Indara would begin to observe Osha and May's duel. May would eventually get the better of Osha and disarm her, ending up in a position with her red lightsaber pointing at an unarmed Osha. Indara would then tell May to strike Osha down in anger and to let her emotions guide her. But May's emotions are conflicted. May now understands that her master was directly involved in May being kicked out of the Jedi Order, so May would turn her aggression towards Indara and team up with her sister. The episode would end with the 2v1 of May and Osha battling the Acolyte, eventually besting her. Once Indara had been defeated, Osha and May would then be torn over what to do. Osha would want to turn May into the Republic and have her atone for her crimes, but May would want to atone for them by committing seppuku with her own blade. And I'll let you choose your own ending here. If you want the more family-friendly ending, we can have May turn herself in and get arrested, but if you want to be edgy, we can have her commit seppuku and atone for her wrongdoings in that way. But regardless, there you have it, the Acolyte reimagined. I know it's a rather simple story, but at the end of the day, the core concept that is at the heart of literally all of Star Wars is a good old-fashioned battle between good and evil, the dark and the light. And I think its simplicity is part of what makes it so good and timeless. Well, if you made it this far, thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this reimagining of the Acolyte, please feel free to like and subscribe. And if you agree, disagree, or just have strong thoughts on any of my creative choices, as always, I'd love to hear you in the comments. Until next time, peace.